And now is the part where everyone says, is the white guy going to say this word? and the answer is no. And the reason is very simple. I don't think it's possible to have these conversations about race as if we were not in a particular position in a racialized society. So as a white man, I'm going to say two things. There are two conversations that have to be had about the use of the term, whether it's in the media or whether it's by people, in their dorm rooms or whatever else. There's a conversation that black folks have to have and are having, and it's their conversation. And I am no part of that, nor should I try to be a part of that, nor should I try to influence that, because as a white person, I will not bear the consequences of whatever decision black folks make about when, if, and how to use the word. And I have to trust, unless I'm a racist, and a pretty vicious one at that black folks are smart enough to figure out for themselves when and how and if to use it. The second conversation is the one that I have to engage in as a white person, which is, should I ever use it? And the answer to that is very simple, and it's very obvious to me, and that answer is no. Irrespective of how many nice young white folks I meet every year who say, well, my black friends use it, and Dave Chappelle uses it, why can't I use it? And it's a double standard to say black. Yeah, it is. And history has been a double standard, so get the hell over it. It really is not about... The history of that word in the mouths of white people is not a mixed history. That word, Mark Twain accepted, whose novels unfortunately don't get taught as anti-racist texts by most high school teachers. They've never been trained on how to do that. They just teach it. And in fact, I've worked in school districts where black kids are asked to read it out loud in class and audibilize the word, where they're the only black kid in the room, and the teacher doesn't even think about what that experience may be like. So it may have been an anti-racist text. I agree it is, and there's a very good anti-racist way to teach it. It ain't being done that way. So when white folks have used this word, it has not been, the context of that has not been historically as if to say to our black friends, hey buddy, let's go down to the Mickey D's and get a Coke, my N-word. That's not the way in which we have used that word. It has been used as a denigrating slur almost exclusively, and so I think for white folks to audibilize it, to say it out loud, which is much more assaultive than in print. Now, in my book, White Like Me, I quote several people using the word, and I do write it. But if I'm doing a reading, I do not speak it. But I think there's a difference between the spoken and the written in that sense. If I'm quoting someone in print, audibilizing it to me is more assaultive. Let me give you a brief analogy to make my point as clear as I can. I'm from the South, and I don't particularly like the term redneck. Now, keep in mind, redneck is nowhere near as historically assaultive or injurious as the word we're discussing tonight. Yet, as a Southerner, I certainly don't like to hear it. I'm not going to say I hadn't used it, okay? I'm not going to say I haven't used it. But when I hear that term, let's say, from Jeff Foxworthy, who I don't think is a particularly funny comedian, okay? But he has an entire routine. He built his career doing redneck jokes, 15, 20 minutes of, you might be a redneck if blah, 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 right? Now, when Jeff Foxworthy, who's from the South, and in fact would probably refer to himself as that term, tells 15 minutes of redneck jokes, I don't think it's funny, but I got to be honest. I'm not wounded by that. I don't take that personally because I know that he's not hating on his people, right? I can take it for, but there's no attributional ambiguity, like having to figure out, what did he mean by that? Does he really hate himself? I can sort of take it for granted that he doesn't. Right? Now, if Jerry Seinfeld gets on stage and does 30 minutes of redneck jokes, we're going to have a problem because he is not in the family. So whether or not Jeff Foxworthy ought to do it, I don't necessarily, I think he could be funnier without it, but I'm not concerned. As a Jewish person, Jewish comics have made a history of telling Jewish jokes, and I don't think they're very funny, and there's a fine line between, self-deprecation and self-hatred, but it's different hearing a Jewish joke from your Jewish grandfather or seeing it in a church bulletin that comes out on Sunday from your very non-Jewish neighbor. So I think it all goes back to this playground wisdom that we all learn when we're about 8 years old, which is, I can talk about my mama, but you sure as hell cannot talk about my mama. And so at some point, At some point, whether or not black folks should use the word or a derivation of the word ending in A, that's a black conversation. And white folks and anyone who isn't black, I think, should just basically stay out of that conversation and let black folk deal with it. But we have to recognize that for us, there's a history, there's a context, and it's not our job to help black people reclaim the word. I've heard white folks say that. We're going to help them reclaim the word as a way to fight. No, if you want to fight racism, march on a police station. If you want to fight racism, march on the school board. If you want to fight racism, fight racism in healthcare or fight racism in housing, march on the bank and protest redlining. Don't worry about using this word to be cute and ironic. It just doesn't work. Thanks.